Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is my first attempt at what I want to call an opinion piece rather than a review. I know that everybody's tastes are different, and just because I like or dislike something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree. So I mean, with this video, you may agree with certain aspects. You might agree 100%, or you might completely disagree. And I mean, that's the magic of opinions, really. But I really wanted to make this video. I hope it doesn't really turn into a rant, but it could. So. Right, so what is it? It is, shall we say, a review-esque video on Madame Web. I saw Madame Web last weekend, and I have some thoughts. Now, I haven't really liked what Sony have done with, shall we say, the Spider-Man extended universe. Turning his rogues gallery and villains into solo movie characters. I personally don't think really works without him. Venom might, if they're going for the more anti-hero, special agent Venom kind of slant on the character, but ultimately I feel that all of Spider-Man's characters are who they are because of how they interact with Spider-Man. So making films based solely on those, I don't really see the point, in my opinion. So when Madame Web was announced, it was a head scratcher, along with the ones that have been announced and rumored and everything else. There's no difference. I was like, this character seems an interesting character to kind of adapt into her own film, because she seems to be on a different level than Spider-Man, in the sense that she seems to be more of a kind of caretaking, overwatching, trans-dimensional character. At least the only prior knowledge and history that I have with the character is from the 90s animated TV show. Animated show, the Spider-Man animated show. I don't read the Marvel comics. I don't read the Spider-Man comics. I don't even know if she has her own comic. So I'm literally going on by that slither of that pre-existing content where she's probably in it for a handful of episodes, for a handful of minutes. So with that being said, I was kind of like, it seems interesting that they would go with that character, and then cast Dakota Johnson as that character, because she's always kind of depicted, from what I know, as a more elderly, older woman. So for her to be cast was a little bit of a bit of a head scratcher. But I also thought that after seeing the trailer, that the fact that there were more Spider Women in it, I thought could quite possibly be a good thing. When Into the Spider-Verse came out, I loved that film. Across the Spider-Verse, I loved that film. I was kind of scratching my head for a while as to why Sony hadn't greenlit a live-action version of a Spider-Gwen film, or any sort of female spider character that they could have adapted, because they own the Spider-Man character license or whatever, and all of the characters that are involved with that IP. So I just thought it was weird that they hadn't done it. And then to see that, you know, that this film was going to feature 3 of them, I was like, well, that's a bit of a tall order, because doing one character justice is quite difficult these days, let alone doing 3. I should really say from here on, and this whole video is going to be spoiler filled, even though I don't necessarily think you can spoil it. But in order for me to be able to talk about it properly, I'm going to have to spoil everything. So if you haven't seen it and you're interested, don't watch this video, go and watch it and then come back. So with that being said, I will put spoilers in the title as well, so you all know. But I'm going to get straight into it. So the start of the film, for me, feels a bit rushed. The thing that feels rushed for me is the dialogue. Not necessarily the setting up of the characters that needs to happen, but how everything moves along is just so quick, particularly the dialogue. The dialogue seems very just kind of thrown out just so we can get the story going. The biggest thing, after kind of saying at the start that, you know, I was really interested in seeing more female spider characters, was kind of let down with this film, because they don't actually get their powers in this film. It's not their origin story. There's three female characters that are chased throughout the film because of their destiny, their potential futures, or their futures. It's not even their potential futures. They are destined to become these characters, and the antagonist of the film, the bad guy, the villain, he goes after them because of a bad dream that he has, which features the 3 females in costume with their powers. That is the only time you see them in costume with powers in the entire film, is literally in a dream sequence and a vision sequence. This film is not their origin story. It's not even how one of them potentially gets their powers. It is literally a tease to what possibly the film should have been. The villain seems to be incredibly undercooked. You don't really know who he is, really why he's doing what he's doing, other than maybe a few lines at the start. And his main motivation for the film is literally to track these girls down and kill them before they kill him, because that's what he's seeing in this dream sequence, is his demise at the hands of these 3 girls. So yeah, all a bit kind of undercooked and pretty weak. So the Madam Web character, she, or I can't even remember her name now, but we'll just call her Madam Web. She has her powers from birth, as a result of kind of her pregnant mother getting bitten by a spider, and therefore the venom kind of transfusing through to the unborn child and then born child, at the start of the film. What kind of confused me is that the mother is saved by a group of tribes people in the Peruvian forest, and they're spider people. And they're kind of a cross between... They look like Spider-Man in the fact that they're all red and they're covered in black vines, so it's kind of reminiscent of his suit. But it also gives me kind of Hellraiser vibes as well, which is maybe what they were kind of going for, to that they're kind of scary and people stay away from the area to kind of protect it. But they give the mother character a spider bite to try and save her, and therefore the abilities of the spider kind of get transferred to the unborn baby. Towards I'd say the end of the second act, after we've established that Madam Web's now trying to protect these teenage girls from this villain, she decides that she needs to figure out exactly what's happening to her. And because her mother dies at childbirth and she's put in the foster system, she has managed to keep all of her mother's belongings in a suitcase, including her journal, her work journal, which has all of her work notes. And there's photographs in the journal. So she decides to go to Peru for a week to kind of try and get answers. And yeah, so she just disappears from, well, we see it, but she disappears from the main story, and for a week the girls are held up with another character, which we'll get to in a minute. And yeah, she manages to find the area and site of the potential what would the right word be, like the dig site, the area in which they're searching for this mythical spider. And she just happens to find the exact space. That one of the photographs that she has that's 30 years old matches up exactly to where she stood, which seems like a bit of a leap. That the rainforest stays exactly the same for 30 years just seems a bit of a leap. And then not only that, but the exact character that tried to save her mother initially and birthed her, turns up and says, "I've been waiting for you. I've got all the answers that you need," and kind of gives her a crash course on, this is why you're experiencing these abilities, and when you're ready, you'll be able to do a lot more. And then kind of there's a out of body kind of dream sequence where for sake of shall we say character development and peace of mind for her, she kind of gets closure on her fractured relationship with her dead mother through actually interacting with her mother in something that happened in the past, where she actually ends up being like, she hugs her mum and talks to her mum, and her mum reacts in the way that she's heard her. So it's a bit like, okay, she can go back in time to something that she's going back in time. She's not accessing a memory because she was never really there. I mean, she was growing inside her mother at the time, but she's not actually there. So that was a bit like, okay, again, the character's supposed to be like multi-dimensional, can from what I can remember from the animated show, can go to different dimensions and interact with different spider people. So she can go forward in time, back in time, and talk to people and all this stuff. So that was the first, and I was like, okay, that was the first instance of that. So after we get back to New York, she touches base with her work colleague, who is Ben Parker. Ben Parker being Uncle Ben, and his sister features in this film, who you may know as Peter Parker's mum. Her husband, Peter Parker's father, is mentioned in the film, but we don't see him. And she is 8 months pregnant with a unnamed Peter Parker. The film takes place in the early 2000s, I believe. So in this universe of Spider People, Peter Parker's not yet born. He isn't named in the film, even though he is born in the film. And he now exists in a world where there are already pre-established spider people. So he is not the first spider person to be in New York, because these teenage girls that predate him will become the spider heroines later on in a possible sequel, but will also get their powers before Peter Parker will, because there'll be a 15-year gap between his birth and him getting powers. So that's also a thing as well. Yeah, there were I talked about earlier about the rushness of the dialogue at the start of the film. There were also two instances where I kind of heavily rolled my eyes, where the mention of power and responsibility are dropped. And I was kind of like, look, I understand that it's important for the Spider-Man character to know and realise that with great power comes great responsibility. I think they did that superbly in the Spider-Verse films, and quite recently in the No Way Home film, where it was a bonding moment for all the characters. That there is loss inherently in the spider characters, that they all lose something, and that informs who they are as heroes and motivates them to do better. It just seems a little wink and noddy in this film, that they're like, oh, we said the thing, we did the thing, whereas in the other two films it's done a lot more classily within the film. So by the time we get towards the end of the film, when Madam Web meets back up with the girls and they go off again because Peter Parker's mum goes into labour, they're rushing to the hospital. They all kind of meet up in a interesting way, and we get towards the end of the film. Now, the villain of the film has been pursuing these characters because he's already had a vision of his death, of how he's going to die. Now, when we get to the end of the film, he dies, but does he? And I only say it like that because he doesn't die how he dies in his vision, because the girls aren't the characters that they're meant to be yet. And also he has a sign fall on him, which would really, really hurt. but he is imbued with these spider powers, much like what Spider-Man is. Not to the, it's not the same spider, but, he has very similar powers. And, I mean, in Spider-Man Homecoming, we see Peter Parker almost get crushed by a lot of concrete, and he manages to lift that off of himself. Him being a 17-year-old with spider powers, able to lift all of that off of himself, and it just seems a bit of a stretch that the bad guy of this film would die because of a sign falling on him, and it's not even it's a letter of a sign. So we see the body, but we don't necessarily know that he's dead. And then they kind of just throw in right at the end that we kind of need the Madam Web character to be more like who we know her as in the comics. So the end of the film takes place at an abandoned firework factory, and there's fireworks going off everywhere, and Madam Web falls into the river, and as she's falling into the river, she gets hit in the face by a firework, and that blinds her in both eyes. Now, I've always been told from when I was little that fireworks are dangerous, but for that to be the thing that actually blinds her is almost kind of like finding out that Nick Fury lost his eyesight through a cat scratch or an alien cat scratch. It's a little bit like, oh, okay, that's how we're gonna do that here. And also, somehow she ends up being paralyzed from the waist down. I didn't see that part of that sequence, or if I did, I didn't realize it happened. So she loses her eyesight and becomes paralyzed within the last 5 minutes of the film. The girls all come together, that we later find, because they're all running away from their situation in the sense that they have nobody. So they have parents, but the parents aren't there for reasons. So it's not like they've really lost anything, but they haven't necessarily had that kind of support structure and that foundation growing. I mean, they do. One of the characters does have a loving father, but he's not in the picture anymore. He gets deported, and she's hiding from the authorities, so she doesn't also get deported. But there's no instance in that situation that her father never loved her. The other one has parents, but she kind of says that she feels that they never wanted to have kids in the first place, and that she feels a burden. And then the other character, her dad exists, but kind of she feels that she's not wanted, that he's kind of moved on with a second wife and had a child with her, and that he's happy with that family. So they haven't really experienced loss, but they have maybe experienced some form of trauma. But it's not on the same level of necessarily losing somebody through an unexpected death, let's say. But because of that, at the end of the film, they're all living together in some kind of attic type apartment situation where they're all kind of bantering on with each other, and Madam Web is kind of just sat staring at the window with her red goggle glasses on, and with a red jacket on, kind of all alluding to a more comic accurate look of what she looks like. And yeah, there's the line of oh, is everything okay? And she says, yes, I see everything now. And she's got a smile on her face. So she's gone through some pretty traumatic experiences in the last 5 minutes of the film, both losing the ability to walk and her sight, but she's absolutely fine because she knows that this is the way it was meant to be. So this was so much longer than what I initially wanted it to be. I wanted it to be 5 to 10 minutes, but I've seen it. It exists. I don't think it necessarily warranted it needing to be made. I mean, no film needs to be made, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I don't know what they're pushing for. If they were kind of using this as a stepping stone to telling more of those characters' films, I don't think they should have done it in this way. It's kind of, they should have just gone with a different kind of story, maybe pre-established Madam Web and more focus on the other three female characters, because this is kind of a nothing burger of a film where ultimately nothing really happens other than somebody dies and somebody starts to become who they're meant to be. Which, I mean, kind of is all kind of superhero-esque films, but there really is nothing in it. Like, it's really bizarre. And yeah, as a kind of final thought as well, I'm a really big soundtrack guy. I love buying film soundtracks, and a good film soundtrack can really change my mood when I come out of a film where, you know, I kind of want to be that character for whatever. It really does affect, like, I can lose myself in a film, and a good soundtrack really does help with that. I didn't even notice the soundtrack in this film. I didn't even notice the music at all. Yeah, so that didn't even try to help it or save it either. So ultimately, it's just another one in a questionable decision making process for Sony. I mean, they've got all these amazing characters and the ability to tell whatever stories they want, and it's strange that they've decided to tell these stories. I didn't like Morbius. I thought that was just so kind of telegraphed as to exactly what was going to happen in that film. 5 minutes before it happened, I literally knew what was going to happen with that. There's 4 characters in that film. It's ridiculous. And this one, I didn't know where it was going, but then it didn't go anywhere, so it didn't really matter. I have no idea what they're going to do with Kraven later on this year, if it comes out this year. But I will go and see that too, because I'm a fan of these types of films. I love superheroes and superhero films, TV shows and stuff like that. So fingers crossed that, you know, every now and then we get a gem like the Into the Spider-Verse films and stuff like that. But yeah, this really was kind of a nothing burger. It was kind of really nothing. So if you've seen it and you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below and we can discuss. I'm curious as to what other people think, if there's somebody out there that loved the film. So yeah, look forward to reading some of the comments whether they be good or bad. And I shall see you all again soon. Bye.